Hey, g'day guys, it's Adam from VideoShowMeHow, and welcome to part 2 of how to do Cape York. If you haven't seen part 1, I definitely recommend pausing this one, heading on back to the channel and watching that one first, as it really goes to set the scene. It runs through all the prep and the answer to the most common questions and topics and sets up this part 2. For this video, we're picking up where we left off in part 1, and we're going to be stepping through that itinerary that we use for our VideoShowMeHow trip from Brisbane all the way to the top. So grab your favourite beverage of choice, get comfy, and let's get started. Now in this first leg, Brisbane to Cairns, it's kind of BAU, and it's up to you how long you take, and it really comes down to how many Ks you're willing to do on the blacktop per day. Cairns is your first destination, and it's where all the fun starts really. So from Brisbane, it's about 1,750 kilometres, and if you're keen for some big kilometres, you could do it in 2 days with a one-nighter. For us, we took our time and we did it in 3 days. Day one for us was from Brisbane to Yeppoon, which is about 700 Ks. Very easy drive, all on bitumen, nice and easy, full freeway the whole way, tons of overtaking lanes coming up. The only thing you really got to watch out with those is where old mate cruising along 80 Ks in the 100 zone the whole way. Then all of a sudden he finds that accelerator pedal and mashes it to make it really difficult to pass in those overtaking lanes. But other than that, it is business as usual. Day two for us was from Yeppoon to Airlie Beach, which is comparatively lazy at only about 500 Ks. It's well worth stopping into Airlie. It is a beautiful part of the world. Hadn't been there before. It is kind of like a big version of Noosa is kind of what my vibe was, but very nice. And then day three for us was the run from Airlie Beach up to Cairns, which is about 620 Ks. Cairns is one of the biggest cities in North Queensland next to Townsville and has everything that you'd expect from a small city. So if you've forgotten anything along the way, now's the time to pick it up. This is where we did our main grocery shop for all of our food, as they have the full supermarkets and all the stuff like you would have at home. Now leaving Cairns, you really start to get the feel that, hey, we're starting the Cape trip proper. And from here, we went straight up to Lionsdown. Now this one is a bit of an optional one. You could go straight to Archer River Roadhouse. It's about 750 Ks, so it is a big day. Lionsdown is one of those iconic locations that you're up this far, it's well worth a visit. It's basically the main pub that's iconic and in the hinterland there. Puts on an awesome feed, it's got some live music, and it's just a great place to meet some other Cape travellers going up and also coming back, camping out the back, and it's a great place to just ease into your trip. From there, we hightailed it up to Archer River Roadhouse, which is one of the main large roadhouses on the way up north. Archer River has water, you can fill up your tanks, it puts on a great feed as well if you're not in the mood for cooking, and has some great swimming at the actual Archer River, which is just down the road from the roadhouse itself. Great opportunity to wash off some dust. When we were there was tons of roadworks taking place as they're rebuilding the whole bridge system that goes across Archer River as it floods during the wet season. So once that's complete, it's going to make coming through here a whole lot easier. And day 7 for us is where we began the Old Telegraph Track. Now, at this point, if you're not interested in doing the Old Telly, that's okay. Use the chapters down below to skip ahead in need. Bramwell Junction is kind of the junction, as it were. It's the decision point, or hopefully you made a decision before now, but you get up to Bramwell's Junction, and around to the right, the PDR continues along the same dirt sort of highway as you were, all the way continuing on. Or at that point, you can down to the left, there is the famous start of the Old Telegraph Track. So definitely recommend filling up with some fuel at this point, grabbing last minute supplies, and then starting to tackle the Old Telly. Now in this video, we're going to cover the basics of all the major crossings of the Old Telegraph Track, but keep an eye out on the channel because we will be doing a more in-depth video individually on each of the crossing if you're looking for that extra layer of detail. Now, like we mentioned, we did the Old Telly all the way through, and so we headed down from here, and we were absolutely psyched at this point because this is one of the big reasons why we came up here. One of the most iconic four-wheel drive tracks in all of Australia. Now, I'm just going to take you through everything we did, and all of it, of course, is going to be dependent on your own driving ability, your vehicle setup, and what kind of driving you like to do, and of course, what kind of entrances and tracks. That is your thing. So from sort of what you do is entirely up to you. Now, the first major obstacle that you're going to come across down the Old Telly is called Palm Creek, and there is a ton of videos of it all going wrong here, but that's okay. There are a few entrances that you can use, and I definitely recommend you park up, jump out, and have a bit of a look around to see all of your options. As you come up to it, directly in front of you, there's basically going to be a mini gunshot, which is almost straight down. For us, it was a hard pass because we didn't want to end the trip early. You can head around to the right, and there'll be a couple of downs into the creek, which are very steep, but manageable. You just got to keep your wheels straight, and you'll drop straight in. Now, the exit from here is definitely a bit tough. Have your max tracks at the ready. Throw that rear locker in if you've got it. Send the most capable rig up first, and have that winch or snatch strap ready you need. Now, with Palm Creek under your belt, you'll be feeling pretty pumped pumped getting through your first major obstacle. There's a couple of smaller crossings you go through before you get to Bertie Creek, and this is where we came to for our first night. It's usually croc-free and a great opportunity to have a swim here in the crystal clear and nice and cold creek. Wash some of the dust off. There is a couple of camp spots around to the left before you cross over, but then more down on the right-hand side up sort of the top, and that's where we camped for a nice little spot for our first night on the track. Crossing this one is pretty easy, but as with any of the crossings, definitely recommend walking it first or having a spotter there in the water so you miss any of those big car-swallowing holes. You kind of got to go up the bank there a little bit, and then you can pretty well shoot straight across. Now, the next day, our goal was to shoot up to Eliot Falls, where we were planning on spending a couple of days. To get there, you've got to go through a couple of minor sort of crossings, but then the main one to tackle is the infamous Gunshot Creek. Now, if you're not interested in doing that, and that's a little too leery for you, the good news is there is a bypass if you don't want to tackle Gunshot. That will take you back out to the PDR. You can bypass the lot and then rejoin the Old Telly later. Now, when you're approaching Gunshot, you'll be coming down a little hill, and all of a sudden you'll be at it. The main crazy cliff face that you see in all the crazy, leery influencer videos is around to the right. So jump out, have a bit of a look. For us, going down that didn't look like it had been done in a little while. A little D-Max, it just wasn't an option, as it was almost a sheer wall. I left my big pair at home, so I opted to go down the mini Gunshot, which is almost directly in front of you as you approach. Now, this one is still pretty hairy, as it's almost straight down and almost car length, as you can see, and you need to do a hard left, so you've got to get up really high on the right bank to try and get around safely. Even doing that, I still managed to sort of scrape the left flares there a little bit. It was deep enough that you could walk across the top of the car from bank to bank. Now, there are other entrances around to the left, and with one of the rigs that was coming with us, he was towing, and that was probably the best way to go around there. There's probably about a half a dozen different options there. Loads of mud, as rain had been there just before we came through, but definitely a little bit easier to come through that way. Definitely a big achievement once you've got everyone through relatively unscathed. Plenty of high fives all round. Right, so the mighty Gunshot all tackled, and it's on to Cockatoo Creek. This is one of my favorite crossings of the Old Telly track. The amount of water coming through is very much going to be dependent on the time of year you come through. Just like all the crossings, I definitely recommend you walk this one, get your spotter out of the car, and have a look at other cars that are going through before you so you can pick your line. Ultimately, you need to head upstream in a little rock channel, and then when you get to a certain point, you go hard left, and that will get you across to the opposite bank. Having a spotter there in the water is a huge help with this one. Now, on the other side, there is a solid climb to get back up to the track, and there's two options. There's one that goes straight up to the left. It needs plenty of right foot, plenty of momentum, hard left and right on that steering wheel as you're going up the sandy hill. And the quote-unquote easier version is around to the right. It's got a little bit of a step up, pretty difficult if you've got a trailer, but plenty of right foot and you'll get up and around. From here, there's a couple of smaller crossings that are relatively easy to negotiate. Same as all of them. Take your time, jump out, have a bit of a look-see first. Use your spotter to path your way through and have fun. Now, after a little while, you'll come across the turn for Fruitbat Falls, which is a definite stop. For us, though, we kept going up to our campsite, which is on a little bit further that we'd booked at Eliot and Twin Falls. We ended up staying here for a few nights. And big shout out to the couple of subscribers that came over and said hi over those few days. Great to see you guys, and hope you guys had fun on your trip. This is a very popular spot, and there are booked campsites here that are huge, plenty of space on them. Make sure you book ahead to get one of these. Each site has campsite spots so you can have fires, unless there's a fire ban, of course. There's toilet blocks, the whole 9 yards. Now, the main attraction here are the falls themselves, and I just reckon this was one of the highlights of the trip, and I totally recommend you at least spend a couple of days here. There are 3 separate falls. There's a smaller set called the Saucepan Falls, and that's where I filmed the first daily vlog at that you can check out on the channel. Then there's Eliot Falls, which is in the middle, which is just absolutely pristine, crystal clear water. It's freezing cold, which is awesome in the heat, and there's a bit of a jump at the waterfall where we can jump down into the crystal clear water below. Absolutely awesome, highly recommended. And then there's the third set, which is up and around. They've sort of got this boardwalk you can walk around called the Twin Falls. These were awesome as well. There's ultimately 2 sort of pools with a waterfall in between them that you can go swimming in. It's just, it's mind-blowing when you're in there having a swim in this crystal clear, freezing cold water when it's stinking hot everywhere else, washing the dust off, and you kind of just, after all the driving you've done and all the dust and all the kilometres, you're just looking around in the bush and you're in this waterhole going, wow, this is just pretty amazing. Now, on one of the days, we nicked back up the road to Fruit Bat Falls, which is equally as amazing. I know I'm saying amazing a lot for these waterfalls, but they really are. It's a much wider falls, and there's plenty of room to have a good swim. This can get quite busy, and it reminds me a little bit of the walk down to the Champagne Falls on Fraser or Gary. They have sort of similar boardwalks all set up, so it can make it nice and easy to get down to the falls. Well worth stopping here and at least having a bit of a swim. From here, we opted to be hightailing up to Bamaga, which meant finishing the Old Teletrack. You'll go through Canal Creek and then onto Sam's Creek, both of which were pretty straightforward. Now at this point, once you get to Sam's, it's worth noting that this is your decision point, as there is a bypass that will take you off the Old Teletrack to hook straight back up to on Bamaga Road on the PDR. Going forward past Sam's Creek is committing to do the deepest crossings of the whole Teletrack, and that is Mistake Creek, Cannibal Creek, Logan's Creek, and the infamous Nolan's Brook. If you get to any of these crossings and decide you don't want to do it, you have to come all the way back. I would say from that point forward, they were the hardest parts of the Old Teletrack. So on from Sam's, you'll go through some pretty rapid fire crossings, the first of which is Mistake Creek, which wasn't too bad, sensible crossing, usual rules apply, and then on to Cannibal Creek. This is a bit more tough, this one. I definitely recommend jumping out or watching some other drivers go through first before you tackle this one. The water was up a little bit when we went through, and you definitely want to take it slow and steady through the crossing, which helps with your momentum, and then particularly when you're coming up the ruts on the other side. Have your winch rope ready, your finger on that rear locker button if you have one, and your recovery gear at hand. The next major crossing you're going to come across is called Cypress Creek, but it's probably better known as the Log Bridge Crossing. Now, you've probably seen 4,000 photos and videos of this one. It is a bit daunting because you're literally driving across a ravine that has twigs thrown across it. It's honestly not that bad though. The logs are enormous and super sturdy. This is where you definitely need a spotter to make sure those wheels stay straight and on the bridge, on the logs as you go across. Don't rush it, go nice and slow. The most important thing is to hold on and have fun. So at this point, you're gonna be feeling pretty pumped because great stuff. You're almost through. There's only really 2 major crossings left. The next one for us was called Logan's Creek. And for us, this was the most challenging of the whole trip. This one changes a whole lot from season to season, and when we went through, there was still quite a lot of water in some of the entrances and stacks and stacks of mud. There's a whole lot of entrances that run into this system, and you can sort of keep going along to the right there for probably 80 meters or so. I definitely recommend jumping out and having a bit of a look through all of them to sort of pick which one you want to go down. There is no other option to go around. You have to go down one of them. There are some directly around to the left as you come up that have a bit more of a water crossing, but they're a bit easier, quote unquote, to go down because they're a bit shorter. In saying that, there was a big 79 series that blew us a CV joint as he got stuck in the mud there, so choose wisely. We ended up going all the way down to the right at the very last entrance. You had to come around quite wide, so you make sure, as with any drop in, that you're going dead straight down so there's no rollover risk. The poor little D-Max got really stuck at this point, and I am very glad that I spent the bucks on the big boy recovery points at the front because I reckon we'll use every ton of the rated version of those. Definitely have all your recovery gear ready to go when you get there. Now for us, when we got through here, there was some massive high five moments going on. Bloody well done was shouted all around because there would have been about a dozen cars that were in sort of our group going through there, and we all sort of teamed together and got everyone through, which was a real effort with meeting other people on the track. And I reckon that's a big part of what it's all about, is helping out your fellow traveller, your fellow Aussie on the trails, and getting everyone through was a big part of that. And from here, it was on to Nolan's Brook. Now, this is very much going to depend on what time you come through. We talk about that a little bit more in part 1 as to when the best time of the season is. Generally, the later you go, the less water there is. For us, there was probably neck deep and at some points in there that we couldn't touch. For most of it, though, it was sort of well up to the shoulders. Now, for us, we really wanted to make sure that everyone in our convoy got through A-OK. We'd come a long way at this point, and the last thing we wanted to do was to sink any of our vehicles right at the end of the Teletrack. So I definitely recommend to pull over, have a bit of a look-see, get out, have a walk through, really get an understanding of what you're about to go through. For us, we put a snatch trap on the front of every single vehicle that went through. We got a vehicle across with one of the legends in our little convoy across first, and then we had a bunch of snatch traps all connected, and we actually attached that to the other side to the vehicle that was coming through. So the second the vehicle going through the water looked like they were about to stop, we hit the pilot vehicle would take off and then pull through the other vehicle. Using that method, we got all vehicles through our convoy without any water in any of the vehicles. And for us, that was mission accomplished. We tackled the Old Telly track, and it was an absolute super stoked moment. We were all very pumped. You can actually camp on the other side of Nolan's Brook, and tons of people chose to do that. For us, we wanted to hightail it up to Bamaga, which meant getting off the Old Telly track. It's about another 15-20 minutes before you get back onto the PDR. You then shoot straight back up to the Jardine River to get across on the ferry, pick up your tickets, and then get across the Jardine River on the shortest ferry ride in the history of all of the world, and then scoot all the way up to Bamaga. Now, for the first night there, we ended up staying at the Seisa campground, which ended up being awesome. It was right on the water there. There were tons of facilities and space for everyone. There were hot showers, fresh water, the whole box and dice. That's where I ended up shooting the damage report daily vlog after I had those sort of weird water gremlins in the D-Max off the back of Nolan's Brook. So you can check that video out on the channel. From here, we shot straight up to Punsand Bay the next day. Make sure you visit the old croc tent along the way and pick up some merch if that's your jam. Punsand Bay is the furthest northern campground in all of Australia. It is a pretty awesome spot right on the water there. They even have helicopter rides, and they've got they even got a pool in next to the bar, which is pretty cool to have a bit of a swim, because you definitely can't go swimming in the water up there because there's too many floating logs with big teeth. Great food and drink. There's a bit of a bar. You can really relax as you've kind of made it. From there, it's only a short jaunt up to the Cape Tip car park. Now, we had a full separate day put aside to do the tip because we really wanted to enjoy the moment. It is only a short drive from Punsand Bay to the tip, and it was one of my favorite roads actually all the way, because it just gets narrower and narrower and narrower as you go with more and more rainforest. Just before you get to the car park, keep an eye out on the right. There's an old resort that's just wildly overgrown, and if you're into that sort of stuff, you can sort of pull in there and have a bit of a look-see. They even got the pool and all sorts of stuff that's just all crazy overgrown. It's wild to see. I think at this point, the anticipation is at an all-time high, because you've made it almost all the way to the top of Australia. And if you're looking at your GPS mapping and you've been following that all the way like I was doing and sort of nerding out a little bit, the little flashing blue dot is basically in the water at the very, very top of the country, and it's pretty cool to see and recognize of where you are. Eventually, you'll get to the top of the car park, so grab your camera if you're taking one, a celebratory cold drink, and head up the hill, because it's a bit of a walk to the tip. I thought it was kind of just there, but no, it's a bit of a walk, probably about 15-20 minutes. You got to go up a pretty solid hill. It was blowing an absolute gale when we were there, which was kind of good because it kept everything nice and cool. You go all the way to the top of the hill and then all the way back down the other side as you get towards the famous little sign. Once you get there, of course, get all the happy snaps at the sign. I surprisingly got a whole bunch of signal when I was up there on the mobile for the first time in a little while, so call home if you need to, or any of your mates if you need to rub in where you are and where they're not, that kind of thing. Definitely a moment for a ton of crisp high fives and solid handshakes with the crew you made it with, because congratulations, you've made it to the very, very tippy top of this great country we call Australia. I want to say a very big thank you to the main trip sponsors of the Video Show Me How Cape trip for all their support. 230 guys, thank you very much for all your support, and Outback Equipment, thanks very much guys. Links to both those guys is in the video description, and of course a big thanks to the ongoing support from the legends that are the Video Show Me How patrons. Of course guys, thank you very much for all your support. And finally, a big thank you to all of you for watching parts 1 and 2 of the Video Show Me How Cape trip. This was a real bucket list trip for me. I've been trying to put it together for years, and I'm so pumped to be able to take the D-Max there that we've been building over this time. If you haven't seen the D-Max build series, I think there's something like 80 videos of all sorts of different stuff we've done to that, and for me, getting up to take it on the trip, I was very humbled to be able to do it and complete it in this way. Share all the trials and tribulations along the way, buy the daily vlogs, and then put together these two videos that hopefully provide some content for you guys in these two parts, that if you're looking to do something like this yourself, then hopefully you've got some tips and tricks to help you along the way. So with that, that is the end of the Video Show Me How Cape Trip series, parts 1 and 2. I hope you enjoyed, guys. A little bit different to what we normally do. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you've got this far, thank you very much for listening and watching. So as always, I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.